Montana Territory, October 1879. Yates Vollen didn't believe in ghosts, but the sound coming from his barn that cold autumn night made him pause with one boot still in his hand. Someone was moving in there. Not the usual shuffle of his mare or the creak of wind through timber. This was softer, careful. He grabbed the rifle from where it leaned near the front door, stepped out into the chill, and crossed the yard slow. Frost laced the dry grass, and the moon was sharp overhead, casting long silver shadows across the barn wall. He eased the door open and stepped inside. A rustle, then a gasp. Then nothing. Yates raised the rifle, his voice calm. "You come out now. Not looking to hurt anyone, but I do not take kindly to trespassing." Silence. Then, from behind a stack of hay bales, a figure moved, slow, deliberate. A woman stepped into the lantern light. Her dress was torn at the hem, her coat several sizes too big, and she held her hands up in front of her. "I just needed somewhere dry," she said, voice hoarse. "Please, just the night." Yates lowered the rifle, but not all the way. Her eyes were clear, tired but not wild. "You alone?" he asked. She hesitated, then nodded. "I swear, just me." He watched her a long moment. Her cheek was bruised and her lower lip had a split. She did not look like a thief. She looked like she had run a long way. "You got a name?" he asked. "Liora," she said. "Liora Mayfield." Yates nodded. "Yates Vollen." "This is my land. You can stay the night. I will bring you a blanket and something warm." Liora blinked. She looked about ready to fall over. "You sure? I said I would, did I not?" He turned and left her standing there in the hay, but when he returned with a blanket and a bowl of leftover stew, she was sitting on the barn floor with her back against a beam, arms wrapped tight around herself. She took the bowl with shaking hands. "Thank you." Yates sat across from her, arms resting on his knees. "You running from something?" Her eyes flicked to his face. "Someone." He waited, but she did not say more. He did not press. "You safe tonight?" he said. "Just sleep. Talk can wait." She nodded, eyes shining in the lamplight. "Thank you." "Truly?" He left her there and went back to the house, but sleep did not find him. Not easy, anyway. He kept seeing the way she had flinched when he first stepped into the barn. The way her shoulders curled in like she had been cold for a long time, not just from weather, but from people. Just before dawn, he gave up trying and got dressed. The barn was quiet when he opened the door, but something caught his eye movement among the hay. He stepped inside and his breath caught. Liora was asleep, curled on her side on the blanket he gave her. One hand rested near her face and something shone faintly on her left ring finger, a gold band. Yates stared. He stepped closer, and sure enough it was a wedding ring, and it absolutely had not been there the night before. His voice came out low. "Liora." She stirred, blinked, looked at him, and then at her hand. Her whole body went still. I can explain," she said quickly. "I am listening." She sat up, hugging the blanket around her. "It belonged to my mother. I always kept it tucked in my pocket. It was the only thing I had left from her. Last night I must have put it on in my sleep. I did not mean—" "You sure about that?" Yates asked. Liora looked at him, and something in her broke open. She dropped her gaze. "I do not know what I meant anymore. I have not felt safe in so long, I forgot what it even felt like. You were kind. You did not ask questions. You brought me stew. I do not know why I put it on. Maybe I just wanted to feel like someone could want me still." Yates exhaled slow. He knelt in front of her, gaze steady. "What happened to you?" Liora swallowed. "My father arranged a match. A wealthy rancher named Caleb. I tried to make it work, but he drank. He hurt me. I left 2 nights ago, took nothing but this coat and my mother's ring. I have been walking since." "You got anywhere to go?" She shook her head. Yates stood. "Then stay. For now. You can rest, get your strength back. We will figure things out from there." She looked up at him, eyes wide. "You mean that?" "I do not say things I do not mean. And just like that, the tension in her shoulders eased some. She gave him the smallest nod. "Thank you, Yates." He nodded once, then turned toward the barn door. But before he stepped out, he looked back. "You keep that ring on if you want," he said. "I do not mind." She blinked, surprised. He gave her a small smile. "Looks good on you." Then he stepped out into the morning light, heart pounding harder than it had in years. Back in the barn, Liora looked down at the ring, and for the first time in a long while she smiled. By midday, the wind came sharp off the Swan Range, stirring the pine trees and carrying the smell of snow not far off. Yates stood near the paddock, watching the sky shift, his hands dusted with dried earth from digging out the post line. He heard the barn door creak behind him. Liora stepped out, wrapped in the coat she'd worn in on, the sleeves still too long. Her hair was pinned up now, though a few pale strands had come loose in the breeze. She walked slow, but steadier than she had that morning, and her boots crunched softly over the frost-tinged ground. "I hope I'm not in the way," she said. "You're not." She looked toward the hills. "I thought it'd be quieter out here. It is. No, I mean, inside me. I thought maybe if I got far enough, the noise in my head would stop." Yates rested his hands on the fence rail. "It doesn't, not at first." When she didn't answer, he glanced at her. She was studying the horses in the field like she didn't know what to do with her hands. "I used to ride," she said, "before. You're welcome to again, when you're ready." She looked at him then, unsure. "You'd let me. You don't need to earn it." Her expression shifted something between disbelief and cautious hope. She stepped closer to the fence. The gelding, a big chestnut with a white blaze, lifted his head and wandered over. Liora reached slowly, laying her hand against his neck. "He's gentle," she said. "He listens." They stood there a while, quiet. The wind picked up and Yates offered her his gloves without a word. She took them, fitting her fingers into the worn leather with care. "I was raised near Helena," she said after a while. "My father was a merchant, dealt mostly in tools and dry goods. He liked to say he built his life one barrel of nails at a time." "What about your mother?" "She died in childbirth. I never knew her." Yates nodded once. "That's hard. All I ever had of her was that ring." Liora turned her hand, the band glinting faintly beneath the glove's edge. "I used to hold it when things got bad. Like if I could just remember what love had looked like for her, I'd know what to look for myself." Yates studied her face. "You still believe in it?" "I want to. Maybe that's enough." They walked back toward the house. The sun was dipping low behind the pines, casting the field in long amber streaks. As they reached the porch, Liora paused. "I'll earn my keep. I can sew, mend, cook a little." "Not that you look like a man who expects anyone to do for him." "I don't. But you've been alone a long time." He turned to her. "So have you." She didn't answer, just looked past him to the smoke rising from the chimney, the scent of old wood and something faintly sweet in the air. Inside, the hearth crackled low. Liora moved to the stove and lifted the lid from the kettle. She touched the handle of a nearby tin cup, then looked over her shoulder. "May I?" Yates nodded. She poured out the tea, steady-handed, and brought him a cup. Then, without asking, she set the second at the other end of the table and sat. They drank in silence. After a while, she said, "You always live this quiet?" "I don't see the need to fill the air." "Maybe not. But it's nice not to be afraid of what'll come next." Yates rested his hand on the table near hers, not touching, just close enough. "You're safe here," he said. Liora looked down at the ring, then at his hand, dirt still in the creases of his knuckles. "I believe you," she said quietly. Outside, the wind softened. The sky darkened to violet and the fire settled into a low, steady burn. Neither of them moved to leave the table. There was nowhere they needed to be, not just yet. The first snow came sudden, a thin hush over the earth by morning. Yates opened the door to find the world pale and softened, edges blurred beneath a thin white sheet. The porch steps were dusted, the path to the barn already fading beneath it. Inside the kitchen, Liora had folded up her sleeves and was stoking the stove. She'd found herself a better dress from the cedar trunk in the loft, one that had belonged to Yates's sister before she'd married and moved south to Idaho. It hung a little loose at the shoulders, but she'd taken it in with quiet care, stitching by lamplight the night before. "I'll fetch more wood," Yates said, pulling on his coat. Liora held out a shawl, wool and faded green. "You'll want this round your neck. Wind's sharper than it looks." He took it without protest, tucking it beneath his collar as he stepped out. By the time he returned, arms full of split logs, the scent of cornmeal and something faintly sweet drifted from the stove. She was spooning batter onto a hot skillet, moving with a practiced ease that hadn't been there days earlier. "I hope you like them crisp," she said, not looking up. "I like them however you make them." She paused, then glanced over. "You always speak that plain, only when I mean what I say." Liora set the pan aside and folded her hands. "I used to cook for folks who never noticed when I got it right. Only when I didn't." "That won't happen here," she nodded once. "Good." They ate by the window where the snow gathered slow along the sill. The silence between them had softened, not empty but settled. When they finished, Liora brought out a small bundle wrapped in muslin. "I found this in the barn rafters, thought it might be yours." Inside was a leather-bound book, water warped at one corner. Yates touched the cover with faint recognition. "My father's ledger," he said. "I forgot it was up there." "He wrote small," she said, "but neat. Funny how you can tell a man's mind by his handwriting." He was careful with numbers, less so with people. Liora didn't press. She turned the book once in her hands, then set it on the table. "I've been thinking," she said, eyes on the snow. "About staying." Yates let the words settle before answering. "You don't need to decide yet. I know, I just—" She folded her hands. "I didn't expect to feel steadier here, but I do. Like I could start again without having to erase everything that came before." "You don't need to erase it," Yates said. "Just carry it different." She looked up and her gaze held his. "Would you mind if I took on some of the work here, not just the small things? I can handle livestock, tend fences. I've done it before." "It's your home as much as mine now," he said. Her mouth parted slightly, but she didn't speak right away. Then she pushed her chair back and stood. "I want to see the pasture," she said. "With the snow." "I'll walk with you." They stepped out into the stillness, boots crunching down the slope toward the lower field. The fence line followed the rise of the land, disappearing into the pines. A few deer had passed through earlier, their tracks clear and undisturbed. Liora paused near the gate, one hand resting lightly on the top rail. "I used to think I'd only ever belong to someone else's life, fit into what they wanted, be who they needed." Yates stood beside her, steady in the cold. "You don't have to belong to anyone but yourself." She turned toward him, wind catching the edge of her shawl. "What if I wanted to belong here? You already do." He didn't reach for her, but he didn't need to. She stepped closer, their breath mingling in the cold between them. "I never meant to stay this long," she said. "I never meant for anyone to stay." He looked down at her. "But I'm glad you did." She reached up then, fingers brushing the edge of his coat collar, slow and certain. "Me too." The snow kept falling, quiet and sure, and neither of them moved from where they stood, two people learning, at last, the shape of peace. The ground had hardened beneath the snow by the time December set in. Mornings came with a silver crust on the windows, and the woodpile grew smaller each week. Yates spent most of the daylight hours mending the upper fence line, while Liora took to keeping the house in order and learning the rhythms of the land outside the barn walls. One afternoon, She stepped into the shed behind the house, where the tools hung in careful rows. Dust floated in the cold light, and the air smelled of linseed oil and leather. A small bench stood near the back, not much more than a plank on sawhorses, but it bore a scattering of worn tools and a folded scrap of canvas. She traced her fingers over a carving awl, then picked up the unfinished piece of leather beside it. Faint outlines had been etched into it: a horse's flank, the curve of a saddle cinch, the start of a name. "Your work?" Yates stood in the doorway, wiping his hands with a rag. His gloves were tucked into his belt, and his hat brim was dusted with snow. "Was going to make a saddlebag," he said. "Didn't get far." Liora lifted the piece gently. "You draw well." "I do better with things I can hold steady." She turned toward him. "You ever finish any?" He leaned against the doorframe. "A few. Made a bridle last spring. Gave it to a neighbor's boy after he broke his first colt." "You ever think about selling them?" He paused. "Never figured anyone want to pay for something I made with my hands." She looked at him, brows drawn. "You built a whole life out here. Roof overhead, fences straight, animals fed. That work means something." His eyes met hers. "I mean for it to." She set the leather back on the bench, then let it show. That night after supper, she brought down a tin box from the loft. Inside were bits of lace, a thimble, and a few folded patterns yellowed with age. She opened one with care, smoothing it across the table. "This belonged to my nursemaid," she said. "She taught me to stitch before I could read." Yates watched her unfold a length of calico she'd been saving. "You planning something?" "A dress. Not for now, for spring." He set down his coffee. "Spring's a ways off." Liora looked up. "I know, but I'd like to be ready for it." He nodded, understanding more than he said. Later, as the fire burned low, Liora sat by the hearth, needle passing slow and steady beneath the lamplight. Yates carved small notches into a strip of pine, marking the days like he did each winter. The quiet wasn't heavy, it moved like breath between them. "I saw a fox today," she said without looking up. "Where?" "Beyond the creek. Red as flame. It didn't run. Most don't this time of year. They're lean and tired." She nodded slowly. "It looked at me like it knew I didn't belong here, but wasn't surprised to see me anyway." "You do belong here," Yates said. She set the needle aside. "You're sure?" "I am." She watched the fire, face lit gold and soft. "I used to think safety would feel like silence, like nothing could reach me. But lately I've realized it's not the silence. It's who's sitting beside you when the noise dies down." He met her gaze across the firelight. "You think you could stay through spring?" he asked. "I think I'd like to stay longer than that." He stood slowly, crossed the room, and sat beside her. His hand, rough and warm, settled lightly over hers. She turned her palm upward, fingers threading through his. Neither of them spoke again that night. They didn't need to. The fire dimmed, and the wind outside shifted, soft through the trees. Inside, the quiet settled deep, not empty, but full of everything yet to come. The thaw came late that year. By the second week of April, the river near the northern boundary had started to move again, groaning under the weight of melting ice, and the lowlands turned to mud. Yates spent most mornings in the saddle, checking the banks and clearing fallen branches from the fences. Liora rode beside him more often now, her seat sure, her voice steadier when she spoke of repairs or planting. That morning they stopped at the edge of the lower field, where the creek curved wide and quiet. The water ran shallow there, and the earth had begun to green in the hollows. Liora dismounted, crouching near the edge to run her fingers through the damp grass. "I used to think spring smelled like soap and starch," she said. "But this is what it really is, isn't it?" Yates loosened the reins and let the horse graze. "It's mess and growth both. Never one without the other." She looked back at him. I want to plant something, not just make do. I want to see something grow because I put it in the ground. There's a patch behind the shed that gets good light. We'll till it this week." She rose, brushing her hands on her skirt. "I've never had a garden that was mine. You do now." They led the horses back toward the house, stopping once when Liora spotted a pair of geese circling overhead. She tilted her head, watching their flight. "What made you stay here all these years?" she asked. Yates didn't answer right away. "I left Missouri after the war, had a brother buried there and nothing else to keep me. I was tired of noise, found this land built slow. Did you ever think about leaving?" "Once. But I realized I wasn't running anymore. I just wanted quiet that meant something." She nodded, pulling her shawl tighter. "I think I was looking for that too. I just didn't know it could feel like this." That evening, she found him on the porch cutting seed potatoes. She brought out 2 mugs of coffee and sat beside him, close enough their knees touched. "I got a letter today," she said. "From the county office." He looked over. "I filed for annulment under abandonment. The clerk said it'll be final by early summer." Yates set down the knife. "You sure that's what you want?" "I'm sure the chapter's closed. I'm not running anymore." He studied her, the way her eyes didn't waver. "I was thinking," she said, voice quieter now, "about what comes next. I've thought on that too." She reached into her pocket and pulled out a folded scrap of paper. "I drew up a list vegetables for the garden, things we'll need for the shed roof, and a note about the school at Flathead. If we ever have reason to send for books." Yates took the paper, read it over once, and folded it again with care. "That a proposal?" he asked. She smiled, soft and certain. "It's a start." He stood and reached into his coat. From the inside pocket, he pulled a small box wrapped in a strip of blue cloth. She didn't move as he lowered himself to one knee. "I've got no grand speeches, just this stay, not for spring, not for one season, for all of them." He opened the box. Inside was a ring, simple but well made, a single pale stone set in a gold band. She stared at it, then at him, and her throat worked with the words. "Yes," she said, voice thick. "Yes, I'll stay." He rose and slid the ring onto her finger, slow and careful. She held his face in her hands and kissed him, the kind of kiss that tasted like rain and warmth, and everything they'd both been denied too long. They married beneath the cottonwoods in early June. The preacher came up from Swan Lake, and the neighbors gathered with jars of preserves and warm bread. Liora wore a dress she fashioned herself, pale gray with a line of stitching at the hem that matched the color of the mountain violets blooming nearby. Yates shaved close for the occasion and wore the same vest he'd worn the day he signed the deed to the land. After the vows, he didn't let go of her hand once. That summer the garden came in slow but strong. Liora kept a journal of what sprouted when, and Yates built a new gate for the west pasture. They slept with the windows open, and some nights they lay awake just listening to the crickets and the distant sound of the creek moving steady in the dark. By fall, the pantry was full, and the shed had a new roof. They hosted supper for the nearest family, and Liora sent them home with a basket of pickled beans and late raspberries. As the cold returned, they settled into the rhythm of 2 people who'd chosen to stay. Yates carved by lamplight while Liora read aloud from the borrowed copy of Emerson's essays. They didn't speak much about the past, anymore, not out of avoidance, but because the future had grown louder. Years later, when the road into Kalispell was widened and the telegraph strung between towns, they still rose with the sun and fed the horses before breakfast. Liora hung washed linens in the same place behind the shed, and Yates kept a carved fox on the mantel, a gift he'd made the first winter after she arrived. They never marked the day she arrived or the day she left her old life behind. They just lived. Together, in the house they built with quiet hands and steadier hearts, through seasons that changed but always came back around.